Story 1. My stepfather paid so little attention to Fight Club that he thought it was a murder mystery about who had killed Robert Paulson. Story 2. I watched Les Miserables in the theater with my parents. At the very end of the movie, my dad whispered, "Wait, Hugh Jackman was the prisoner at the beginning?" He had no idea why Javert was chasing this apparently random character for the entire movie. Story 3. It's not the entire plot, but when we watched the final Harry Potter movie, a friend thought Snape wanted to see Harry's green eyes again as he died because they were the color of Slytherin House. Story 4. My mom thought Rogue One had a happy ending because they were hugging in front of a sunset. Story 5. I watched Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers with an uncle. I asked him what he thought afterwards. He said, "Seems kind of far-fetched." Story 6. I was watching Titanic at a cinema in the West End of Glasgow. When the ship hit the iceberg, the girl behind me said, "Ah, it's going to sink." Her date replied with absolute confidence, "No, it will not." Story 7. The grandfather of a friend saw that Beethoven was playing in theaters while reading the newspaper. He thought it was a film about the composer, so he bought tickets. It turned out to be a movie about a dog, and he was the only adult there without a child. Story 8. Some friends and I were watching the James Bond film Spectre while extremely drunk and became really confused by the repeated and overlapping sections. We were talking about how the Memento-style use of nonlinear time was an excellent addition to the Bond films, only to realize I had been sitting on the remote and rewinding it all night. I think we watched it for about 4 hours. Story 9. I once watched Austin Powers with my much younger brother. At the end, he said it would be such a cool movie if they would just take things seriously. He had never seen a James Bond film and thought the movie was real. He just assumed everyone was bad at acting. Story 10. My ex-girlfriend only realized halfway through Schindler's List that Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes were different people, which I found hilarious. The hero of a film about the Holocaust appeared to be an enthusiastic Nazi, casually murdering people and generally evil. Story 11. Somehow my dad completely missed that The Princess Bride is a comedy. Story 12. My adult siblings were watching a movie at my mom's house. My mom always falls asleep. In the movie, they were going to extract a person from somewhere. My young niece asked what extract meant. My mom woke up briefly and said, "They are going to pull all his teeth out." From that point on, everyone waited for that to happen. Story 13. My sister-in-law asked if The Martian is based on a true story. Story 14. I knew someone who thought Thanos snapping his fingers just sent a bunch of people back to their home planet. Story 15. In my high school history class, we were talking about The Notebook one day. Someone mentioned the couple dying at the end and a girl started sobbing. They died? I thought they fell asleep. Story 16. It was me. I am not a fan of superhero movies, but I liked the X-Men when I was younger. I decided to check one out because it featured one of my favorites. I started watching, but they messed up his whole backstory. There were no other mutants and basically no action. After about 30 minutes, I realized it was not a superhero movie. Jake Gyllenhaal was excellent in Nightcrawler. Story 17. When I was young, I watched the first 15 minutes of Zoolander from the hallway because I was supposed to be in bed. For many years afterward, I thought people regularly died in freak gasoline accidents. Story 18. The best-known television guide plot synopsis from 1998 for The Wizard of Oz. Transported to a surreal landscape, a young girl kills the first person she meets, and then teams up with 3 strangers to kill again. Story 19. My wife is a big history buff, especially United States history. She also doesn't like campy vampire, zombie, or monster movies. I made her watch Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. 10 minutes into the movie, she turned to me and said, "I don't think this actually happened." Story 20. I remember someone saying that Scar from The Lion King is not evil because he is a lion. Wild animals cannot be evil. They are just acting on their nature. That person seemed to forget that these are anthropomorphic, talking animals with human-like thoughts and morals. Story 21. My mom did this with every movie we watched. It drove my siblings and me nuts. 10 minutes into the film, she would say, "I know what they're going to do. I can read movies like a book." She was wrong 95% of the time, but being wrong never fazed her. She did it our entire lives. She also asked us 20 questions about a movie we were watching for the first time. Mom has been gone for a year now, and these little annoyances have become things I miss about her. Story 22. My father-in-law fell asleep while we were all watching Groundhog Day. He woke up at the end and said that the whole thing was a dream. Yes and no. Story 23. Someone here said his friend really hated District 9. When asked why, he replied, "They are just disgusting bugs. Who cares if they die?" Story 24. The person who said that the Hunger Games series was about how evil liberals are because the people in the Capitol have unnaturally colored hair. Story 25. My brother's first movie in the theater was Disney's Pocahontas. He thought it was a story about the first Thanksgiving and completely missed the themes of racial tension and colonization. Part of the reason he thought it was about Thanksgiving was that there were many references to food, like the song about sandwiches. The sandwiches song was his favorite, and he sang it for weeks afterward. The song is called Savages. Story 26. I am reminded of the time Ricky Gervais said that when he was in school they watched Animal Farm and discussed fascism and so on. Another student said we were ridiculous for overthinking it and that it was just a nice story about some animals. Story 27. Uncut Gems spoilers. I met a man who thought the ending was cleverly ambiguous because Howard's eyes are still open when the camera zooms in on his face after he is shot. He thought that meant Howard could still be alive and faking it. Story 28. My mother watched Breaking Bad, promptly forgot most of it, and then watched El Camino. She thought Todd was a police officer and that Jesse was in prison for selling methamphetamine, but she did not understand why his cell was a hole in the ground instead of an actual prison. Story 29. Someone told me that they did not want to watch Ocean's 11 because they were afraid of water. Story 30. I don't know if this counts, but my sweet, angelic aunt rented Silence of the Lambs years ago, thinking it was a Christmas movie. This remains one of my favorite family stories. When asked when she realized it wasn't a Christmas movie, she simply stated, "Towards the end." Story 31. I was walking out of the movie Birdman when an older couple walked behind me. The woman said she was not sure she understood it, and that she had never seen any Birdman movies. Story 32. After watching Austin Powers, my grandma asked why a rich actor like Mike Myers could not afford to fix his teeth. Story 33. My friend criticized Apollo 13, saying, "They just want a Hollywood ending. Whoosh." Story 34. The Lord of the Rings. The Two Towers. My dad forgot most of the first movie. He did not realize there were 4 hobbits. He thought it was the same 2 hobbits in every scene. We did not take him with us to see the third film. Story 35. One of my mom's favorite movies is the 1997 adaptation of Lolita, which I have always found a bit odd, but she loves Jeremy Irons. About 3 years ago, while she was watching it again, I learned she believed the film was about a college professor obsessed with one of his students. She assumed Lolita was 18 or 19 and only then realized the character is a child. I have no idea how she missed that. Story 36. A friend of mine, after watching Dracula, said, "What's the point? You know who the vampire is from the start." Story 37. My mother spent the entire film Edward Scissorhands pointing out things that were not available in the 1960s. She missed that it was a satire of suburbia. Story 38. On the podcast This American Life, they told the story of a woman whose favorite movie was The Sound of Music. Her family watched the video home system tape in a cabin that had been left behind. Later, as an adult, some friends were talking about Nazis in the film and she replied, "What Nazis?" She had only seen the first half up until the wedding. The second video home system tape was missing from the cabin. To her, it was just a lovely romance. Story 39. When I was a child, my mother fell asleep watching Child's Play, so I sneaked out and started watching it. At first I thought it was Home Alone because I only saw the child character. I was really shocked when Chucky killed the teacher in the closet. Story 40. Back in the 1980s, a major television event was the day after, a doomsday film about the aftermath of a nuclear attack on the United States. We were watching it with extended family. More than halfway through, A relative suddenly asked whether there was radiation in the bomb. Story 41. I watched The Fellowship of the Ring in the cinema when it first came out. As I got up to leave at the end, two teenage girls who had been sitting behind me started talking to each other. So, did they get rid of the ring or not? Yeah. They threw it in the fire right at the start. Story 42. Lots of people think Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street is a hero. Story 43. My mom hated the ending of The Truman Show because the film cuts to credits right after Truman finally leaves the stage. She wanted to know what happens to him afterward, how he lives and adjusts to the real world. That is a perfectly fine thing to imagine. But the film's point is that Truman is on a quest to escape a scripted life and constant scrutiny. Story 44. Years ago, I took my Nana to see Failure to Launch about a grown man, Matthew McConaughey, who still lives at home with his parents. They hire a woman, Sarah Jessica Parker, whose job is to get man babies to move out. My Nana had a mild drinking problem. I would pick her up for the movies and she would be tipsy, then sober up halfway through the film and be confused about the plot. There were only 4 or 5 people in the theater, including us, so when she sobered up and started asking questions, everyone could hear her. She said, "Oh, I get it. She's like a hooker." Story 45. My father-in-law is a retired nuclear engineer. When he heard about the new show The Big Bang Theory, he literally canceled an appointment, prepared snacks and drinks, and sat down to watch the science show. His face was indescribable. What was the icing on the cake was that he and Sheldon shared quite a few traits. Story 46. My wife and I decided to watch The Personal History of David Copperfield, 2019, starring Dev Patel. About halfway through, she turned to me and asked, "So when does he start doing magic?" She thought the movie, which takes place in the 1800s, was about a magician rather than the novel by Charles Dickens. We will never forget that movie night. Story 47. One time we were watching Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And my wee guy said he liked the tint they shot the movie in. About 5 minutes later I said, "I can't believe they shot this whole movie in a tent. I still think about it sometimes and snort." Story 48. I remember when Life of Pi came out. I was listening to an episode of Joe Rogan, and he was arguing that the movie was silly because there was no way a skinny kid could fight off a tiger. While opinions are not necessarily wrong, forming a strong opinion without understanding something comes close, in my opinion. Story 49. Back when the original The Matrix was new, a group of us watched it in one of the science rooms. After it finished, a girl in my class said that it was good but a bit unrealistic. I still think about this once a year and get annoyed. Story 50. I saw the movie Outbreak at a dollar theater in my college town a few weeks after it was released. The movie was entertaining, but what I remember most is the woman sitting near me who couldn't bear to look at the screen whenever a scene grew tense. Highlights included her burying her face in her hands and screaming at different points, "That monkey is going to eat that little girl." And later, "Oh my God, they are going to kill that monkey." I wish sitting near that lady was an option every time I go to the movies. Story 51. I watched Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette with my mother. As the credits rolled, she exclaimed, "Now we will never know what happens to her." There was a long pause. Coppola's film ends when the French people overrun the castle and Marie Antoinette has to flee for her life. But the historical record is clear. She was beheaded. Story 52. I had a friend who auditioned for Miracle on 34th Street, the stage adaptation of the movie, fully believing every character in the story, including the role they were offered, was an animal. That belief came solely from the script cover, which had reindeer on it. I did not discover this for weeks. It only came out when they said, "I thought Finley was a reindeer." It turned out they believed the entire play featured talking animals. Story 53. Some people misunderstand Scarface. It definitely has cool one-liners, but Tony Montana is not someone meant to be admired or emulated. He is supposed to represent the American nightmare. There is also that weird relationship with his sister. Story 54. When I was a child, I watched the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. There is a scene where, after he gains his powers, he takes his shirt off for the first time and looks muscular. My mom said she did not think that was his real body, and I thought she meant he was wearing another human skin so he would appear muscular for that scene. I imagined it was a dead person's preserved skin. Story 55. My teacher thought that Zootopia didn't really have a plot. Rather, it seemed designed to make animals look sexually appealing. For people replying to Reddit user Badloss's comment, Jessica Rabbit is one of the most attractive animal or animal-like characters ever created. She is bunny-like, especially in a Playboy way, and is roughly 25% rabbit. Story 56. On television, some people who watch anti-hero shows like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos come away thinking, "Whoa, Walter White and Tony Soprano are badasses. Walter White, Tony Soprano, and characters like them are pieces of shit." The story is about how that causes them to lose everything. Story 57. My confused grandpa, watching Finding Nemo, did not understand that Marlin's ocean search and Nemo's fish tank scenes were happening far apart. He's lost and found. I don't get what the big deal is. Story 58. I remember watching the first The Lord of the Rings movie at home with my mom, my sister, and my sister's friend. After it was over, the friend asked, "Why did Frodo and Gandalf want to get rid of a ring?" 3 hours later, she still understood nothing. Story 59. I was once running late to see the Bourne Identity with friends. I came in about 5 or 10 minutes after it started. I got most of the movie from context clues, but afterwards I completely confused my friends with questions like, "Okay, so why was he a hobo? And why didn't he remember anything?" My friends were like, "What are you on about?" I did not realize Bourne had been in the ocean in the first few minutes, or that he had been shot. I first saw him in Switzerland. He looked homeless. I thought he was in a disguise because he was a spy. I went back and forth between thinking he had unexplained amnesia and thinking he might be faking amnesia to escape the government. Faking made sense to me since how else did he know the safe deposit box code? But if he was faking, why was he so shocked to see the contents of the box? Maybe the government had sent him on a mission posing as a hobo and he later actually became homeless and was angry at them. And later in the movie, what was with the yacht? How did boats factor in? How did he go from being thrown off a yacht to being a hobo in Switzerland with amnesia? It was very disorienting, and I spent most of the movie trying to puzzle through my lingering questions. Lesson: if you ever think surely the first 5 minutes cannot be that crucial to the plot, you might be wrong, especially for the Bourne Identity. Story 60. I was in middle school when Seven came out. The parents of one girl had seen it and gave her a summary. They thought the baby was the 7th victim. Story 61. A coworker told me she loves Beetlejuice and has seen it many times since childhood. She only recently realized that the characters played by Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis are dead. Story 62. My husband and I watched Disney's Up. By the end of the introduction, I was bawling because it was a sweet, sad story. My husband was fine. It turned out he thought the little girl was a boy, that they were just bros, and that later he was trying to foist their old dreams on his wife. Story 63. A coworker said that Fight Club represents how men should be. I thought he was joking until I realized he was dead serious. Story 64. After watching 12 Years a Slave with my 19th century United States history class in college, a classmate said, "I mean, it was good, but I don't get why he didn't just escape." Story 65. I watched Fried Green Tomatoes with my very conservative, antiquated grandfather. He thought it was a wholesome film about friends. To be fair, the film is largely presented as a friendship story, but I thought it was funny how much it relies on viewers' preconceived notions about the relationship between the two main characters. I could watch a heartwarming and heartbreaking film about lesbians while he saw a story about female friends empowering each other, and we were watching the same movie. Story 66. My dad is a big science fiction buff, but my parents are getting old. They went to see Arrival and my dad came back and said he hated it. Now it is one of my favorite movies, so I had to know why. Apparently the aliens were just octopuses and did nothing for the entire movie. I asked what they thought about the idea of slipping through time, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Story 67. Content warning. Discussion of sexual assault. Skip if you need to. Also spoilers for Kids, which is about 30 years old now. The movie Kids. My friend, who was kind of a player in the parlance of the time, was explaining the plot to me shortly after it came out on video. I had not seen it yet. His description was that a girl contracts acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and to get back at the man who gave it to her, she gives it to his best friend. What actually happened? The girl contracted human immunodeficiency virus when she lost her virginity to a character in the movie who prides himself on manipulating virgins into sleeping with him. Virgins should also be read as underage girls. It is basically the main plot. When she finds out she has human immunodeficiency virus, she spends the movie trying to find the man to tell him. When she finds him, he is already mid-act with his next victim. The main female character is so broken by her failure that she stays at the party where the man is and becomes intoxicated. I do not remember if she was drugged or if she took drugs or alcohol. While incapacitated, she is raped by the man's best friend while she weakly protests. It is a horrifying movie, and for some reason my friend saw it and thought this woman planned it. What the hell? Story 68. The fact that Squid Game was adapted into a real-life competition by Netflix and Mr. Beast shows a complete lack of understanding of the show's entire point. Story 69. The first time I watched the film The Departed, it was on a small television and I hadn't realized I needed glasses. I started watching after the opening scene and thought Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon were the same character. I was very confused until the ending. Story 70. My mother and I were watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was her first time. At the end, when the Ark is loaded among the other government relics, she looked at me, shocked, and said in a tone as if she had discovered something amazing, "So there are multiple Arks. I have never facepalmed so hard." Story 71. I am not misunderstanding the plot, but I remember coming out of the cinema after watching Sweeney Todd and hearing someone say, "Bloody hell, why did that have so much singing in it?" Story 72. Not sure if this counts because it's more the title than the plot, but when I was very young my dad was given a documentary called How Hitler Lost the War. For some reason my child's mind concluded that someone who had a documentary made about them must have been a good person. I never saw the documentary, and for the next few years I thought Hitler was a great general. I did not question it until my parents were talking about the Holocaust one day, and I asked, "Wait, wasn't Hitler good?" My parents looked wide-eyed and corrected me quickly. Story 73. All the people who missed the ham-fist fascist irony in Starship Troopers. Story 74. I once heard someone say that Monsters Incorporated is about a door factory. As a huge fan of that movie since childhood, I was flabbergasted. Story 75. People who think Blazing Saddles is racist are wrong. Honestly, these people are as dumb as a bag of rocks. Story 76. My mum fell asleep watching Third Rock from the Sun. When she woke up, it had ended and I was watching a science fiction film whose name I can't remember. I managed to convince her that Third Rock from the Sun was still on, so she sat through 50 minutes of the movie confused. She asked a couple of questions like, "Who's that?" And I'd say, "That's Harry. They're in disguise." She made up a plot and stayed invested until the end, when the movie's title appeared and everything unraveled. Unbelievable how much mental gymnastics she did rather than suspect I was being a little shit. Story 77. It was not so much a misunderstanding of the plot as going in blind to something you really should not see. My dad called my brother and me to tell us he had rented the film Borat. He has a sense of humor, but we were not sure whether the movie would work for him. We received a call about 2 days later. It sounded like he had seen something he should not have and was processing the shock in real time. Other men in their 60s are usually processing their careers, relationships with loved ones, and accomplishments. Our dad spent a significant amount of time at this stage of his life trying to figure out what he had just watched after seeing a naked British comedian run through a hotel when he had caught his boss masturbating to his supposed wife. Life is weird. Story 78. I was a kid when the movie Happy Feet came out. At the end of the movie, Elijah Wood's penguin returns home, and his love interest is surrounded by several baby penguins and another male penguin. She explains she is a teacher to all the baby penguins, but I missed that and thought she had about 10 babies with the other penguin and had moved on. I thought that was depressing, but it made sense since he had been gone a long time. I remember telling a friend how dumb the ending seemed, and she said she did not see it that way. Story 79. My mom did not pick up on the fact that Benoit Blanc is gay when we watched Knives Out. Glass Onion. She's a very kind and accepting person, so it was really funny more than anything. The conversation went as follows. Me, Mom. How did you not get that he was gay? Look at his bathing suit, come on. Mom. I just thought it was because he was British. Me, he's British in real life, but in this movie he is a Southern man. Also, did you not see Hugh Grant playing his gay partner? Mom. What are you talking about? Me, it literally shows them living together and makes it pretty clear they are gay. Mom, oh well, I just love Hugh Grant. So when I saw him I got excited and didn't think about why he was in his house. Story 80. People were throwing elaborate Gatsby parties after the release of The Great Gatsby. I am sure they were fun, but they were also the opposite of the point of the book and the film. Story 81. Someone once told me that Inception was just a movie about a guy trying to take a really long nap. I guess they missed the whole layers of dreams thing. Story 82. I didn't know Prometheus was an alien movie until the very end. I was like, oh my god, no way. Story 83. My mom hated Life is Beautiful because that man lied to his son through the whole movie. Story 84. Oh, this is me. I watched Arrival years ago and thought the reveal of her with Jeremy Renner and their daughter were flashbacks, not flash-forwards. I thought they had a daughter who died, then divorced and later reunited when the heptapods came. I thought they knew each other the entire time. I have no idea how I got it so wrong. I rewatched it after my brother told me how wrong I was. It changed everything and I understood the movie much better. Story 85. I was teaching at night school and the classroom we used had Hakuna Matata, meaning no worries, in big letters. The teacher missed the whole point. Hakuna Matata doesn't work. You can't just run from your problems. Story 86. I have a friend who misunderstands movie plots so often that I think he does it on purpose. One of his worst was with the movie The Incredibles. He hated the movie because he thought the message was that you should always hide your talents so you do not stand out. His proof was that the family seemed happy living incognito and became steadily more miserable as they returned to being superheroes. I think he watched the movie in reverse. Story 87. We were having a few drinks at a friend's house when someone said she had seen a great film recently but could not remember the name. There were two boats with bombs. One held civilians and the other held prisoners, and they had to decide which boat to blow up. You guessed it. The only thing she remembered from The Dark Knight was the boat scene. Story 88. American History X. I worked at Blockbuster at the time, and a customer excitedly said they had squashed that N-word's head like a grape. I don't think that dim bulb got the message at all. Story 89. Watching the first Avengers movie in theaters with my family. Bruce Banner hulks out at the start of the final battle, and my mother leans over and asks, "When are John and Emma showing up?" This was from the 1960s Avengers television show. Story 90. A magazine review of the original Highlander film described it as a time travel science fiction story. There is no time travel in the movie. I believe the reviewer was not paying attention and took the flashbacks as literal trips to the past. Story 91. When I was 11 or 12, my parents let me watch the movie The Others with them. At the end, when the family moves out, I earnestly said, "Oh good, the ghosts are moving out." The twist that Nicole Kidman and her children were the dead ones apparently flew right over my empty little head. But my parents had a good laugh. Story 92. The worst misunderstanding of fiction I have ever seen was on a television show rather than in a movie. Two men were absolutely certain that Star Trek: The Next Generation was a right-wing fantasy depicting a completely right-wing society. They argued that Jean-Luc Picard was a die-hard conservative and that it was obvious. Star Trek: The Next Generation depicts a post-scarcity communist society. There is no money. Everyone's needs are met. People work only if they want to, usually for self-fulfillment. Priority is placed on education, the arts, the sciences, and exploration. Multiculturalism and acceptance of other cultures and new ideas are fully embraced. It is as far from what they imagined as possible without the characters looking directly into the camera and explaining it. Story 93. My daughter and I were watching Braveheart. About halfway through, she asked where the dragon was. She was thinking of Dragonheart. Story 94. I regularly see people argue that Tony Montana from Scarface was not the villain. He is an evil scumbag, and I will never understand why they do not see that the film is about how awful he is. Story 95. It applies to almost everyone, but RoboCop is a beloved 1980s action film that satirized the genre. Story 96. I originally posted this to the Reddit Movies forum, but it was removed. A couple of weeks ago, I watched Fallen with my parents, and my dad concluded that Denzel Washington's character was a serial killer all along and had hallucinated much of the movie. His evidence was that the wobbly, distorted filter during the demon point-of-view camera was clearly meant to indicate Denzel Washington being high or hallucinating, which is certainly an interpretation. Story 97. That happened to me. To give context, Jordan Peele's Get Out was translated as Korra, which means run in my language. My dad was watching it in the living room. I asked what movie it was and he said Korra. For some reason my mind heard Korra, as in the Avatar cartoon. I watched the whole movie thinking it was a live-action gender-bend adaptation. I even thought white people were the Fire Nation. Mind you, I have not watched Korra either, so I do not know why my mind went there. Story 98. A friend of mine who has difficulty with the concept of fiction, let alone science fiction, told me he had watched The Matrix and really liked it. I said that it was kind of neat how it simultaneously takes place in the present and a distant future, claiming we are actually living in a computer-simulated reality. He said he must have missed that part. Story 99. I saw Brave with a guy I was dating, and at the end of the movie he asked if the bear was her mom. Story 100. My gran was deaf, so she relied heavily on subtitles to watch TV. Subtitles are better now, but a few years ago they were hit or miss. Gran was a notorious scaredy cat who hated violence and especially horror. I was very surprised when she said she had watched a very sad film the other night. She thought it was about a small boy who had a terrible life and that all the people around him died. Turned out she had not understood The Omen. Story 101. I partly think he was joking, but my grandfather watched The Truman Show with us and was absolutely fuming. I said, "Isn't this a wonderful movie?" He hotly disputed that, saying it was disgraceful that a man was trapped on a movie set and that such things should not be allowed. We finally realized he thought it was a documentary. Story 102. My mom didn't want to see The Revenant because she was told Leonardo DiCaprio's character is raped by a bear. The logistics of that are just ridiculous. How would that even happen? Story 103. When I was 11, I was surfing the channels trying to find something interesting to watch. I stumbled upon The Shining and watched bits and pieces while continuing to surf. I was very confused by the naked grandmother, the twins, and why that mean man was chasing that poor little boy. It was not until I watched it as an adult that I realized I had seen some of those scenes. Somehow I was not traumatized. Story 104. There are many American service members who brag about playing America, fuck yeah from Team America. World Police while they were on tour in Iraq, completely oblivious to the fact that the song and movie are an explicit criticism of them and their country's foreign policy and behavior. Story 105. Someone tried to explain to me that Slumdog Millionaire was not about a young man who wins a quiz show despite having no formal education, proving that luck is the ultimate skill. Story 106. The first time I watched Two Girls, One Cup, I had no idea what it was. I thought it was normal lesbian pornography and masturbated quickly, finishing before any of the scat play started. Later, people at school were saying how disgusting it was, and I defended it as good pornography, not knowing what they meant. Story 107. This guy's take on Monty Python's Life of Brian. Story 108. I do not know if it counts, but I once had a huge argument with someone I am no longer friends with. He claimed I did not know what a deus ex machina was and then proceeded to describe a Chekhov's gun. Story 109. Concluding that the plot of the Titanic is simply that the ship should never have sailed, instead of recognizing the real story about how wealth and class do not determine true love. Story 110. A shocking number of people at my high school watched American History X and sided with neo-Nazis. Story 111. The number of people who see the protagonist of Fight Club as a hero is frightening. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.